We're now live on YouTube too. Hello, everyone on YouTube. We'll just wait one more minute until everyone is here. See the numbers going up, so that's fabulous. Thanks for joining us tonight. Happy Douglas Week, everyone. So we'll just wait a few more seconds just for everyone to come in. All right. Sure there'll be more people joining, but I'll start off. So good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever you're tuning in from. Happy Douglas Week, everyone. My name is Dr. Caroline Schroeder. I'm here with my great friend and colleague and co-organizer Douglas Week, Dr. Tim Groenland. We're two of the co-organizers of Douglas Week 2021, and it's such a pleasure to be here with such esteemed guests tonight. We're absolutely delighted to welcome you all to this panel and this conversation. We're very happy to celebrate Ireland and Frederick Douglass in Ireland with you all. It's been an amazing week with so many creative and inspirational events and talks and conversations. And as some of you know, as a scholar of film and visual arts, I'm very biased, but I'm very excited for this event. And before I hand over, just a few items of housekeeping. This event will last about an hour. And if you have questions, which I am sure you will have, you can put them down below in the Q&A box. So there's a little Q&A box. You pop your question there. Be curious, be part of the conversation if you want. We'll be monitoring, Tim, myself, and the Douglas Week team will be monitoring the questions, and we pass them on to the panelists. The second piece of housekeeping is that this is being recorded. So as I said, we're live on YouTube, and the recording will be available on YouTube afterwards. And now it is my great pleasure to hand over to Kevin McCann. He will be guiding us through the conversation tonight. Kevin McCann is a writer and a filmmaker from County Cavan. Kevin's drama and documentary work has examined history and faith and language and life along the Irish border. And supported by Screen Ireland and Northern Ireland Screen, he's currently developing the first feature film on the 1916 Easter Rebellion called The Rising. And yeah, we hope that you enjoy this next Douglas Week event. And Kevin, thank you so much for joining us and for guiding the conversation. And the stage is yours. Thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Caroline. It's a great privilege for me to be hosting this event. Thank you to everyone at Douglas Week, and especially to Aidan Whelan for organising this and many of the other fantastic events. Arracht is our focus for this evening, but we'll also be looking at other aspects of life in general that Tom's great film is going to allow us to speak about. As Caroline mentioned, this is going to last for about an hour. Our focus will be the film in the Irish language called Arracht, which is written and directed by Tom Sullivan. And I'm then going to bring in the rest of the panel to talk about the film and other aspects related to themes and topics that Tom's wonderful film has brought up. I'll first introduce our panel, if I may. Tom Sullivan, the director of the film Arracht, is a writer, an Irish writer and director whose work has been screened and won many awards at the international film festivals, including Tribeca and Palm Springs. And over the years, he has picked up multiple nominations and wins in the Irish Film and TV Awards. His latest work, Arracht, a feature film set during the 1840s in Ireland, is causing quite a stir, winning many awards and accolades for Tom and his wonderful creative team. Joining us on the panel also is Pamela J. Peters. Pamela is a Dine multimedia documentarian from the Navajo Reservation, where she was born and raised. That's in Arizona State. Her first clan is Tachi Ni, which means red running into the water. Her work explores the history and identity of people, cultures, and environments in the style she calls Indigenous realism. Her photographic series, Legacy of Exiled NDNZ, explored the 1950s Indian relocation program. Also on the panel is a great friend of Ireland, Maureen Grady. Maureen is an Irish and American citizen, a poet, actor, producer, and teacher, a graduate of Stanford University with degrees in literature and history, a master's in theatre. Maureen has studied with Seamus Heaney and Ivan Boland. She has published 2 books of poetry, works in both theatre and film, and with the Irish Screen New York and LA film festivals. And finally, on our panel, Dr. Barry Monaghan. He lectures at University College Cork in the Department of Film and Screen Media. He specialises in Irish and European cinema and film theatre. He has written a history of the Abbey Theatre and film, and more recently published a book on the films of Lenny Abrahamson. But we're here to talk to Tom Sullivan about his wonderful film. I think we might start off. Tom, we're going to play a clip, but perhaps would you introduce us to your film, introduce it in case we have people watching that have not seen the film. What is the film about, and give us some background to it, and then we'll play the clip.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for turning up, and thank you guys for inviting me along. How are you, Kevin? Nice to meet you. I've never met you before. So Arracht was shot about 3 years ago, back in 2018 in Littramullan in the west of Ireland, and it's an Irish language feature set in the 1840s around, it takes place just before, it starts just before, like maybe the summer just before the first blight, and it ends about 2 years after that in the winter. So it spans almost 3 years. It's about a fisherman who lives in a fishing village on the west coast of Ireland, who is a man called Colmán Sharkey, who is a very competent, not well to do, but he's a very competent individual, and he has a friendship with the local landlord that his father had too, and when the famine hits, he goes up to plead leniency with the landlord, and that's where the story turns, and then we watch him and we trace him as he loses everything, and including his humanity. But there is hope towards the end of the film. So that's kind of in a nutshell what it's about.
Thank you, Tom. Are we going to play the clip, if that's possible?
Yeah.
Tardu mór take Europe.
Tu sé teach an gnárátaí.
Cé a socran rátaí sin.
Tá chulagáirí hart a lá himos. Fi gan that hain.
An bach bhí chula gan eile. Le císágaí nó nachhfuil.
Tá. Ach ní mé mu déag. Aber leis lieutenant with mit sosla neckal den. Take sé hain.
Ceir leor. Chuin gapan tú. Gúil fábhar a cínte leis an lieutenant. Agus tú ráis an gcuid eile acu go bhúdíic. Tás ní sem máster an talamh se bheith?
É mus tá haig. Tású le dí am nóach tú lán na runna sosig maachsa.
Nach mór an maithas in tí fáil.
Cúrmach nes. Sin óna fancy.
Se siar. Himos.
Se siar.
Tá tú gar go lórnis.
Sinna do rohan a fancy.
Má tá. Níl meach a gur a brethúil. Fáil inis.
Tú go éis ónas nó. Hanesh!
Tás cé cílín se seochailmú.
Go macha se fa deal.
Ach se. Bhfuil mis tríis ní tú wacín.
Marvelous stuff, Tom. Congratulations. I hear a wonderful sound there, the dog barking and all the rest. I think you picked up some awards and nominations for the sound as well. Great.
Yeah,
great.
it's funny. It's funny watching that. I tell you, I love that scene. Like, and I love that scene from the day we went to shoot that scene. And all those brilliant actors. Like, I mean, the guys are just amazing in that. It's a world class acting wise. I think it really is. The lads were just, you know, I still watch it, and I remember when we, like, cutting this film was a huge challenge, but that scene just came together in no problem. It was just one of those scenes that just worked, because they're all so good in it. And the dog thing is interesting because the day we shot that, there was a helicopter delivering cement over to some house out the back of Littermullan. So, like, it was an absolute disaster, and we eventually got in touch with them, and they promised they would stop flying between a certain time, or that we'd get a chance to shoot it. So if you can imagine, like, there was helicopters flying overhead and everything. But the whole dog thing was, what I wanted was the sense that in the film there's a transition for all of you who haven't seen the film, or hopefully you will. There's a big transition in the film between pre-famine and post-famine. It's a severe chop that happens about half an hour into the film. You jump forward in time, and what I was trying to achieve there was the feeling of life in the first half of the film. So you hear animal sounds, and, you know, I tried to fill the screen as much with life, because Ireland was thriving at the time. There was 9 million people living on the island, and it was full of life. And then it was decimated, and the emptiness that occurred after that, I mean, I think is what we tried to achieve by sucking the life out of the film, basically. And the dogs, for me, really still give me goosebumps, because they really nail that for me, you know. When that gun goes off, you can imagine that there's people everywhere. Just in the, you know, it's great the way sound can do that for you, you know. That we just put those dogs in, and it just, for me, it was an amazing addition to the film, you know. We had a brilliant sound engineer, or sound designer, Brendan Rehill, and he won an award. They won an award, actually, in an IFTA. They won an IFTA for sound design on it. So that's the story behind that one.
Rightly, and rightly so. But I suppose, looking at the subject matter itself, you're talking about the great hunger in Ireland. Many filmmakers, or actually not that many filmmakers, have tried to put it on screen. It's a big responsibility. What were the pitfalls that you tried to avoid? Or, you know, I don't believe anything is a cliche myself. But were there aspects of it that you were conscious that you wanted to include in the story? Even putting in those sounds is an example of you know, what makes it an authentic film.
That's a big question. I think first of all, I had Kate McCullough shooting it for me, and she's a brilliant DOP cinematographer. She's very exciting talent, and I'm lucky enough to have worked with her you know, when she was just starting out. So she tolerates me and has worked with me a couple of times, and will work hopefully with me again. Actually, we'll be working together again soon. But Kate brought a lot of authenticity to the visuals, in terms of the what we tried to do was, from the beginning, we want to avoid the prettiness of Ireland and shoot the beauty of Ireland. And beauty isn't necessarily pretty. Beauty can be quite stark, quite dramatic, and quite lonely. Whereas prettiness was something we tried to avoid constantly. And there was on the first day, I'll give you an example of that. On the first day of the shoot, towards the end of the first day, I had a scene where I had a few extras walking across a stone bridge, and it's funny, like, how easily you can tip into cliche trying to shoot that era of Ireland and the costume, and it looked like a scene from Darby O'Gill. I'm not joking you. And I honestly shat myself when I saw it. I was like, oh my God, what are we doing? And that was a massive lesson for me on day one. I was like, okay, we cannot do that. Like to have people walking in costume. It just looked, particularly across a picturesque stone bridge, it just looked like Hollywood kind of back in the 1950s. And so the authenticity, I think, comes from the visual. Also, I was a real stickler for costume being dirty and everything being that everybody that the costumes look like they've been worn, and that these people, and I had a lot of Clodagh was amazing costume, but I think she was a bit surprised at how dirty I wanted everything, and it took us about a week to get there. And I would get very I wouldn't say emotional, but it was hugely important to me that it was one of the biggest things for me that everybody looked like they were working, because people physically worked. Everybody physically worked back then all the time, from the moment you got up in the morning to the moment you went to sleep. You were working, doing something. You were shoveling something. You were gutting fish. You were pulling something out of the ground. You were doing something. And the clothes for me had to. I think that's a huge part of it. A huge part of the look of the film. And so that was massively important. And just in performance, make sure.
The dirty fingernails as well of the lead character.
Yeah.
Those things are
Yes. Yeah. Just in the performance as well, that, like, you know, I believe this for everything I do is, you know, to avoid people sitting around talking to each other, or, you know, to have people doing stuff physically all the time as much as you can. And particularly in the first 20 minutes, 25 minutes of the film, and also when he's on his own, he's always doing stuff, you know, they're always doing things. And I think that helps, because it gives it a documentary kind of feel to it, where you're watching people working or physically doing something. I think the audience are kind of brought in more, you know. They're not just sitting back watching a depiction of something. In a way, if you put the labor and the work into it, as you like, people physically working and doing things, I think people just accept that that's real then, for some reason. I certainly do. So and I'm really proud of that with the film.
Yeah, and your lead actor, Donald, he looked like he was living it. You know, I mentioned about the dirty fingernails, but he also knew how to row a boat, and he looked like a man that was used to work, as we say where I'm from. So you were blessed in having that. When did you decide that Donald was your lead?
Donald, I did a short, well, half-hour film with Donald about 7 or 8 years ago. It's the first time I worked with Kate as well, which is kind of. So the next time me and Donald and Kate worked together was on Arracht. And so I find Donald an incredibly soulful actor. You know, he has this ability. He's a very deep thinking kind of individual, and he does an awful lot by doing very little. Do you know what I mean? He's one of those guys. So, and also the character of Colmán, there is an arrogance to him in a way that is his Achilles heel. Colmán is a very controlling character. Like you saw in that scene, it's actually depicted very well in that scene that he wants to control everything. And as we all know, what happens with nature is sometimes it just turns us up on our heads. And that's what the film is about. It's about how nature, Mother Nature can decide our lives for us. So I wanted to give Colmán that sense of arrogance to him. In fact, you know, at the beginning of the film, we see that they're poaching drinkers, and Colmán doesn't drink. So, I mean, his history is of an abstinence. He has an abstinence. So he's a dry drunk, if you know what I mean. And all that energy is put into his control, and he controls everything. And so I mean, so Donald has an element of that to him. as a person. He's a very disciplined person. Donald's the kind of person who, if he takes something up, he goes 150% at it, you know. So so he was just right for this, you know.
He surely was. He surely was.
So he was on board from the beginning. Like from, yeah, I was thinking about him when I was writing it. So
yeah, and he speaks the native tongue, you know, like it's as natural to him as his breath. It's not. He didn't have to you know, rehearse it or practice it.
Well, as he said himself, if he was alive 170 years, like he was born 20 miles down the road from where the film was shot, and he was saying, you know, if this film was made, if I was alive 170 years ago, this could easily have been my story. You know what I mean? So I was blessed, very lucky to have an indigenous Irish language speaker himself and on the rest of the cast that are world-class actors. I mean, and I would say that without any hesitation, those boys could stand toe to toe with any actor in the world. And I'm just blessed that has happened, because that doesn't come along that often. So you've got Dara Devani, who played Patsy, and you've got Donal, and all the other cast. But the two boys, you know, are very exciting talents. And the fact that they're both from that area, they both speak in the same dialect, is just a consequence of I think where the gods were, you know.
Yeah.
Gods were with me, you know.
I have a couple more questions, and then I'm going to bring in the rest of the panel to chat to us. Just in relation to acting, there was another wonderful moment between two great actors, Donal and the actress whose name escapes me right now, but you might remind me who she is. And they were talking about the Great Hunger, and that it was one of the standout lines in the film, in that Colmán says it didn't just happen to them, it was done to us. And I forget the actress's name, but she's
Siobhan O'Kelly. I was going to mention her there as well. Another incredible actress. I mean, I've known Siobhan years, and just she's got that look as well. It's a look that people have from back there. That, I mean, it's this handsome Irish thing. I don't know what you'd call it, but it looks oldie worldy, kind of what you would see in Indigenous, when you see photographs of Indigenous people. And Siobhan has that look. I think she's perfect in the film, and she gives the film, even though she's not in it much, she gives she shines that light. And funnily enough, that line, I toyed with that line, with not putting that line in the film, because I really wanted to, in the film, I wanted to tell a story. I wanted to tell a story. I believe that these things happened, and that the political side of it wasn't on a lot of people's minds at the time. And I tried to get that sense of distance, that, like, if you were living on the west coast of Ireland in the 1840s, and in a fishing village, you did live that was your existence, and the only contact you had with British foreign policy or those kind of things would have been your landlord, and the relationships with the landlords were complicated as well. You know, they weren't all mustache twirling bad guys. Some of them were multi-generation. They were there for generations. So it was murky. The waters were murky. It was a kind of sometimes it was a weird relationship between the peasant. Now, it was always master peasant, but those lines got crossed, and, you know, so I tried to get a bit of that in, but I suppose I couldn't. That is the one. I think the scene in the landlord's house also shows the horrendous complacency and the laissez-faire thing that happened with the British foreign policy at the time. And when I was researching what they were saying in the Houses of Parliament and the decisions that were made around it, that was the voice that came from the landlord. He was voicing that. But it's in terms of the local, the people's awareness of what was going on. I mean, they didn't know that these people were that this was being orchestrated in a way. These people didn't know. As somebody said to me, somebody gave Donald a note. Yeah, actually, Michael Loftus, the guy from back in Littermullen who helped us with all the boat stuff, and he's from back there. And he said to Donald one day, "But this fella doesn't know he's in the middle of a famine." You know, and I thought that was a really interesting observation. You know, these people don't know they're living. We look at it now and know, you know, but what they were existing in what they were existing in, and that's more to the authenticity of what I was trying to achieve. Yeah. But I suppose I couldn't turn my back on, you know, the implications and the responsibility that does lie at the feet of the British and what went on at the time. But I didn't want it to be about that. I didn't want the film to be about that. So that was chosen carefully, and I think it's enough, you know.
It certainly seemed to be, the film seemed to be aware of, or there were ghosts all over the, you know, in every scene, you could almost see the ghosts in the corner looking out on the shoulders. It was just, you did such a great job in leaving space for, you know, the voice of the ancestors that maybe is a whisper at this point. But I might just bring in the panel now and ask for their thoughts on your film, Tom, and they all come from different perspectives, and maybe they'd share what their initial thoughts on it, and perhaps we'll go into other aspects a little later on. Barry, I might start with you. From an academic point of view, you're well versed in Irish film, and how does Arracht sit with the rest of them?
Well, absolutely brilliantly. I mean, the recognition that it's had, you know, publicly has already been incredible and very much warranted. Tom, it's a stunning production.
Thanks, Barry.
I wasn't fortunate enough to see it with a live audience, but hopefully I'll have that experience, because it's one of the great ways of seeing films on the big screen, as I suppose we should. In Ireland, because our Irish is what we call a minor language, I suppose, we haven't had many feature-length films in the language. And I suppose Bob Quinn is one of our great filmmakers who has more than once produced stunning films, as Gaelga. But you know, even still, we celebrate it because of that, and rightly so. However, what I really loved about this film, and I think the panelists who've selected it for its next major advancement for nomination on the global stage, so Fionnuala and Lenny and really heavy hitters who know the Oscars and who know great film, have selected it not just because it's an Irish film in the Irish language worth celebrating, because it's a brilliant film, and they know that there are people who know the game internationally. They're absolutely incredible filmmakers and contributors to the art. So I think that's one of the greatest things that you can be so proud about, and we can all be proud about as well. You know, we know that international audiences, and we too, when we receive a film in another language subtitled, we know generally that box office numbers decline slightly with that. It's a little bit more work to have to read a film and watch it at the same time. But something that I found stunning about this was it is an absolute pleasure to sit back and just listen to it, to the sound of the language, to the, as you said already, Tom and Kevin, to the acoustic landscape, and then to the visuals, which are stunning as well, and the performances. So that's just my first reaction to it, I suppose.
Thanks, Barry. Thanks. That's lovely for you to say that. It means an awful lot.
Pamela, you're over in Arizona at the moment. What was your impression of this? Had you seen a film in the Irish language before? And, you know, had you much introduction to Irish movies yourself?
Well, this is actually my first Irish film that I've seen in your Indigenous language, and it was beautiful. It was such stellar production. I really liked it. It's so different to see that layout of your country as, you know, compared to where I'm from. I'm from the desert. Our whole landscape is red. But I have to be honest, I don't know the in-depth details of what the Irish people had endured during the famine. I've am starting to learn a lot more, but it parallels very similar to what we as Native Americans have gone through here in the United States. And also it aligns with the colonization that has happened with the English people. I love the fact that you are preserving the language within film and the artistic outlet. I hope more people will see it. I'm definitely going to share it with more people. I just loved it. There's aspects in the film that I really liked. I like the, I was telling Kevin, there's like different things that I like show perseverance. And I love the perseverance of how this man can, despite the fact of the atrocities that have happened, he still continues to thrive and to live and wants to help others. And I love that aspect. And there's a part in the film where the Englishman was not happy with, I can't remember the character's name, when he was speaking in his indigenous language. And I was telling Kevin, and I was telling Kevin, I said that I like seeing that because it does really demonstrate like the fear that colonizers have when we speak our language. And I don't know, I'm really glad you put that in there. So
yeah,
it's an overall beautiful photo.
Yeah, I think, thanks, Pamela. I think, I think, you know, I think, as you said, there's a lot of parallels between what happened to us and what happened to your people on different sides of the planet, but at a similar time. And I think what happened to us as well, and I'm sure you can attribute to this, is that our culture was decimated. We lost our language, we lost our religion, our gods, even our games, our sports, what we played, we nearly lost it all. And we're hanging on by, in a lot of places, by, there is a bit of a thankfully a re-emergence of the Irish language now in Ireland, but it's tentative, and what I really wanted to do with this film was, like, I'm immensely proud of Ireland and the people of Ireland and what they, and my modern art, like my Irish, all my compatriots and people, and what we have achieved. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to make a film where we could all be proud watching it, and I think I wanted to make a film where we felt proud of who we were and what we had suffered, but not in a way that's kind of, I want to do as honest as I could. So I focused on people with flaws and normal people, but people who endured, like we all do. Humans are incredible species for that. I mean, you could say a lot about us, but we hang on in there. And I think that's part of the human spirit. That's something that we should all be proud of. It's that ability to keep going. And I think when you hear our language spoken the way it is, and it's so authentic in the film, because it is the way these people talk in my film is the way they would have spoken back then, without a doubt. I mean, all my main actors had to learn English when they went to school. They are, as we call them, Kaintor Oruchish, or Daulam Shitsawalya, as in they learned it at home, as in they were brought up speaking Irish. So there's a muscle memory in their mouth. Like, that's what I find about these people, because I speak fluent Irish, and I was an actor myself, but I think there's a particular muscle memory if you're born speaking the language that you just can't you can't fake it really. And these people have it, and I think it just pours off the screen. And you know, I'm so glad that we went down the road of making sure that everybody was from that place, you know, because I think my biggest ambition for the film really is and it's something that I only dare dream about, would be that an Irish language film would go into the cinemas in Ireland and Irish people would actually go and see it. I mean, for me, if that happened, if I achieved that, I mean, that would be beyond my wildest dreams, because the Irish language needs films like Arracht. They need good films that entertain and also make you feel something, and, you know, don't get caught up sometimes in the usual crap that you know a lot of movies do. So for me, this is my shot at making people turn up and involve themselves in their own language, because also we have an awful the schools here, the way they teach Irish and the way they did when I was a kid. I was lucky enough to go to an all Irish speaking school, and it was wonderful because it was we learned it in a different way. But the way Irish is taught in schools otherwise, most people of my generation came out of school hating Irish, but not hating Irish as a language, but hating the way it was taught, really, and then wishing that they could speak it. You know, everybody here wishes we could speak it. There's no doubt about that. I don't think there's anybody in Ireland who'd go, oh, I'd rather not speak my own language. But it just was taught in a really irrelevant way, and I want to make it relevant. And I think this film has a chance, maybe, of people going to the bloody cinema.
Yeah.
Until we ever get back into the cinemas.
Hopefully, please God. Maureen, I'd like to bring Maureen in here. Maureen, you know, you've seen many Irish films in the festivals that you're part of. From your poetic point of view, I'm sure you've got comments on the film too. What was your impression of Arracht?
Well, I loved it so much. I've seen it 3 times now, and I just am.
Wow.
It's a complete work of poetry. I'd say it's a perfect work of cinema.
Oh, thank you. Wow.
Image and landscape and sound, and it is just flawless. I'm going to really, I have to say, I'm going to, when I can have your permission to send the link to Academy members, I'm going to send it to everyone I know to vote for it. This film is just a masterpiece, I think. And I just wanted to go over I come from a background of poetry and acting too, but I just wanted to talk about a few images, because for a poet, as you know, because you wrote a piece of poetry, Tom, like the opening prayer and closing prayer is so stunning, but also poetic moments in the film. For example, just the green sweater with the rocks around it. I don't know if I will ever recover from that moment when he is, making his child out of his sweater and the stones, like his own framing of that sweater. The woman's arm on the land, the dead woman's arm and hand on the land that represented the starvation from which she died. I mean, the turn away Kitty when he doesn't want her to witness him murdering someone. Everything, like just the costumes, like Kitty's shawl. I was just dying over every single moment of detail. Yes, the fingernails. Donal I've known for years because I absolutely love him. And I've always said to people, I know we talked about this, Kevin, with The Rising, but I've always said to people, and I know a lot of actors in LA and New York and everything, he has the most soulful, deep, it's just depth and soulfulness. That is what he represents. Almost like a young Daniel Day-Lewis in his sensitivity, like so absolutely committed, intense. I just was so thrilled when he said he was going to do this. I saw him actually at a big event in Los Angeles where Kevin had a reading of The Rising. And I saw him a few times recently, and he comes to art festivals and stuff. And I've always wanted to see him in a role because I haven't seen the short. I'd love to see the short you did with him. But
I can send it to you, Maureen. I'll send it to you.
I would love to see it. I actually am inspired. I'm in Mayo right now. Let me just say that I'm in a cottage in Mayo. That's why I don't have my perfect background of Frederick Douglass, which I love that art. but I'm in the Delphi Valley where the Duloc tragedy happened, as you know. And there was I'm praying the wind, there's a wind tunnel here that has been so fierce, we haven't really been able to go outside for a couple of days because the door came off the hinges when opening the door of the farmhouse. Anyway, so it is there are famine graves on this farm, and there are fairy mounds. It's like the two sides of Ireland merge here on this huge farm called Glenkeen Farm. Before you get to Lewisburg in the Delphi Valley, one of the only things in the valley, there's only 3 inhabitants of this valley. And I feel like I couldn't have been in a more incredible place to see the film. I've seen it once before and then twice while here, but just to be in this valley. And this, of course, is where the Choctaw, the great Choctaw tribe, had helped, were one of the only groups that helped the Irish during this, during the Great Hunger. And then the Irish repaid the debt, they said, just recently during the pandemic by, donating money to the indigenous tribes in America that he who will not be named ex-president, was ignoring the suffering of. So that was an incredible moment of paying it forward. I mean, just unbelievable connection between Native American and Irish.
Could I interrupt there, Maureen, and just get Pamela's view on that as well? Pamela, the Navajo and the Hopi, they're your people, or the Navajo are your people. The Irish, as Maureen said, did respond to the appeal recently for COVID. I was sorry to hear of your recent tragedy as well, and maybe you'd like to talk a little bit about that if you wish.
Yeah, well, the Navajo Nation was hit really hard with COVID when it came to the States back in March, and a lot of my relatives have passed away. And just more recently, my father passed away from COVID, and he passed away about a month ago. And in our traditional belief, in our traditional beliefs, we believe that, we have to start over and we mourn for our loss. And I was telling Kevin earlier, I said, because Kevin, when I first met Kevin, I had this beautiful long black hair, and I used to roll it in my traditional Navajo bun. But since my father has passed, I have short hair, and I cut it off and left it with him.
Oh,
so he can remember me. But yeah, so we are very thankful that the Irish people did help, the Navajo and Hopi people, and still continue to. So there's something that we genuinely have. We care among all the indigenous peoples around the world. There's a connection that we have. We have it connected with our language. We have it connected with our culture, with our traditions. And that, I think that's something a lot of non-indigenous people can understand. And I think because of that enduring connection that we have, we want to take care of each other. And I think right now it's definitely critical, because right now, I mean, that was another thing I wanted to ask you about your film is because of the language. It's revitalizing the language. We're trying to do that in our films that we're on the Navajo Nation, is we're recreating films in our traditional language. I've lived off the reservation and I've lost a little bit of my language, but I've reconnected because it still lives in me. And I feel like there's when you talk about language, it stays within you. It's in your DNA. And from that, I feel like I've reconnected, and I said a prayer that I haven't said in a long time when my father passed away. And I was like, oh my God, I remember this. So
can you share some of that prayer with us, Pamela?
I really can't, because it's part of our ceremony that we have. Okay. But I can share with you. I normally give an introduction of who I am in my traditional language, and I can do that. And we normally introduce ourselves with our clans, so we know, we share like where our families are from. And so I can share that with you. I'll usually do my introduction by saying Yat she Pamela Peters Inchke, Tchachini Nishlon, Klashti Bashchin, Tohodlini Dashache, Aro Kilfishtini Dashanala, Kotago Nazahishle. So I just basically shared my plans. My plan is Tachini, which was with my introduction. That is my first plan, and that is from my mother. And that is the Water Flows Together clan. And then I'm born for my father, which is the Red Cheek people. And then I also give thanks to my grandfather, which is my Che, and he is from the Water Flows Together clan. And then my grandfather, my Nale, which is my dad's dad. And I do this in a humble way to remember my ancestors, and also just to let them know that they can hear me when I talk my language. Sorry, I didn't think I was going to get this emotional. Sorry about that.
No, Pamela, it's lovely. Yeah, my pops passed away when we were shooting this movie. Now it was before COVID, obviously, but my dad was a real character, and I remember when we were shooting the film, he had cancer for about 4 years. When we were shooting the movie, and anybody who knows him now will laugh at this. People kept telling me, like, no, he will hang on. He knows he won't die. He won't go until you're finished the movie. And I kept saying, you don't know my fucking father. And 2 days before we finished, I was taken off set, and I had to get a car to Dublin, and I was with him when he died, thankfully. Yeah, I mean, I think what you said about your language and how it informs who you are, and also how you speak to your ancestors through it. And I feel sometimes that Irish people have, there's a hole sometimes in us that, you know, that I think the language is an inherent part of your brain structure and function, and it's how we've evolved to be who we are. And I think there's a lot more about language that we don't understand, that's inherent in us. And I think when you talk about speaking to your ancestors, you are actually when you speak in your own tongue, it's I think an absolute bond and a link to people who went before. And to try and get that back, I think is something very, very important.
And speaking
I'm sorry about your dad, Pamela. That's very sad. Sorry about that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. And on behalf of everyone else in the panel, we send our sympathies to you and your family, Pamela. Speaking of language, Maureen, poet that you are, did you have? I was reading your wonderful book of poetry, and did you want to say something about the Great Hunger? I know some people call it the famine, and some people are. It's a political term, or it's a term that people
I'm going to call it whatever Tom calls. I'm going to call it whatever Tom calls it.
I know what you mean, Kevin, but I call it the Great Hunger a lot. I mean, and sometimes it just slips in, the famine. I mean, a lot of people say, you know, there was no famine, and that you know, that we were, in a way, there was food in Ireland, but the right people weren't getting it. A famine is when there is no food, but there was food, and that's also true. So I do understand when people correct, when you say the famine, a lot of people say it wasn't a famine, and I absolutely see that. And maybe I should stop saying the word famine, because, but you know, I think there was a blight, there was a, you know, there was an agricultural disaster that left us all starving as well as everything else. So I suppose. But I think, yeah, it's a funny one, isn't it, Kevin? Mm-hmm. It raises a lot of heckles sometimes when you call it famine, when you refer to it as famine. It's another conversation, I think.
It's another conversation, and I know that there was a group in America looking for the word genocide to be used instead of famine. Maureen, you might have something there that could just paint a little another poetic picture in words of the famine?
Well, it's just, I'll read a poem from my book of Irish poems called Land of Dream and Dreamer. And it's a poem, Hunger, Black 47. In the winter of that year, the Queen's landlords feasted as always. And when they ventured out to inspect their post-eviction properties, they saw the blighted black potato fields, the dying and the dead. They held fine French silk scarves up to their faces to mask the stench. Next to the road, in a ditch, the dying lay, raving with fever and puking yellow bile. By the hawthorn tree, a woman long dead, her stomach distended, pregnant with starvation. Not far from her, two lovers, their frozen bodies under a single shawl, their mouths, teeth, tongues stained green from grass, the last thing left on earth to eat. By summer, only their bones were visible in the fragrant bog, stark and chalk white, pounded by rains, howling in the wind, gleaming in the thistle.
Wow.
Thank you, Maureen.
I wanted to say something to what Pamela was saying. First of all, Pamela, today is the anniversary of my father's death. So all of our fathers, I feel like their spirits are with us today.
Yeah.
A great Irishman, a great Irish American, but he couldn't have been more Irish, and a Mayo descendant too. In the valley here, there is this beautiful famine monument, which if you've been to the Delphi Valley and you put, like you do with Holocaust monuments all over the world, you put a stone when you go by at the very rugged carved cross, not like a Celtic cross, but a really primitive from the mountain. And on the monument, first of all, it was erected on the day that Nelson Mandela became president of South Africa. So it brings in the Black community, which I want to start opening it up to the Black American experience too, and the Frederick Douglass Day and week that we are. But also there's a quote by Gandhi. So it has the Indian, and it says, for the poor who walk the world, all the indigenous, all the poor, all the suffering, all the devastated who walk the world. It's not just for the Irish. So it brings together Black, Indian, Irish in one monument, and genocide in a way too, because of the stones that are all piled up. And it's just the most powerful monument, I think, in all of Ireland. I mean, to me, it's more than the incredible famine ship at, Crowpatrick, or it's just so beautiful, and it speaks to the whole world. And I don't know if we're going to start talking about the Frederick Douglass thing, but I did have a quote for when we do.
I'll come back to that in a wee moment, Maureen. Barry, if I could turn to you, you're listening to this conversation of poetry and reflection and cultures having a commonness. What are your thoughts on the subject at the moment?
It kind of what I'm hearing matches or allows me to make sense of my first reaction to the film, which was, and Tom, please forgive me, because I know people hate when somebody mentions another author or piece of work.
I don't mind.
I hope this isn't disrespectful, but my first reaction was feeling some relationship between the film and Cormac McCarthy's work, which I absolutely adore. And by the way, not in the immediately the thing you might think of immediately, which is the road and the post-apocalyptic thing, but more in a much more humanistic way, where McCarthy and you put people in an extreme situation and test their humanity and push their humanity as widely as it can possibly be pushed. And I think once you do that as brilliantly as you've done, it makes sense to people everywhere in the world. Maureen's made references to at least 3 different continents there already, and Pamela has invoked traditions going back generations. And I really feel that that's one of the beautiful strengths of the film, where the coincidence of Douglas being in the country as the film starts it echoes something that ties Holocaust suffering, slavery, the Great Hunger, these conditions where humanity is left bare and suffering because of an inhumanity perpetrated by another. And really what is tested at those moments is the profundity of our own ability to deal with these things and the profundity of our own humanity as individuals. And I liked the way you really humanized all of the characters. There was no black and white villainy and heroism. There was a complexity there, which is very true to the way I believe we struggle. And some characters maintain their dignity in the face of that horror perpetrated by others, by our fellow men, and others collapse completely. What happens when we've no codes anymore, when law and society goes as easily as a crop that keeps us alive? We're kind of stripped back to our bare being, our beliefs, and the things that make sense to us. And I felt that throughout the whole film. And so it's really interesting because when Pamela spoke there and as you answered some of the questions, Maureen spoke, I kind of had my own responses kind of reiterated in a different way or explained in a different way. So that was really nice as well. I hope that answers your question, Kevin. I know I came slightly from the side there with it. But
I might just go to back to Pamela briefly for a closing comment. Pamela, if you will, on, I suppose I'd like to ask about your own people and their dealing with the history and oppression. Is there something that your people have learned that we Irish can take on board?
I was going to say something a little tongue-in-cheek, manifest sovereignty. It's actually just really, I think with us, since
did you say manifest sovereignty?
Yes. Yeah. I think within the United States, a lot of people don't know that we have nation-to-nation relationship with the United States government. We have, 567 tribal nations, and we still have, over 200 different tribal languages spoken. And we still continue, despite the colonization and, the patriotic voice that's pretty much trying to contain us, we persevere, we continue, we still share our traditions and our knowledge within our nations. And that's what I feel like we are doing through the sovereignty. I think what Tom is doing with his film is exactly that, doing that, sharing the history, sharing the culture, sharing the language. And I think that just needs to continue with all Indigenous communities. Just really take hold of your storytelling and share it. And it will branch out, and it teaches the younger generation that there's a history that can visually be seen, and there's a culture that can be visually seen, and a language. And I hope, especially with the language, I really hope that, through filmmaking, it does revitalize this new generation to really take hold and learn about their culture and their language.
Thank you, Pamela, and our best wishes.
Thanks, Pamela.
To all the Navajo and Hopi people over there, and wish them well. Before, I think we'll finish with Maureen, but before, I'd like to go to Tom. Tom, have you anything to close us out on your somebody did ask when and where will it be available for the general public to see? So maybe you'd answer that and any closing comments you have.
Yeah, no. So the film, obviously, because of COVID, has been pushed back and back and back. But thankfully, our funders, who've been amazing, TG Cahara and the BAI and Screen Ireland, they're all focused on getting it into cinemas, which is wonderful. They're not putting us under any pressure to release it in terms of like virtually, which unfortunately for a lot of films, they don't have that choice. They just have to go. And I've watched so many films been released, you know, cinematic films that should have been seen on the big screen that just weren't and won't be. And we're lucky in that way. So hopefully you'll see it when everybody's gone back into the cinemas again, which might be later in the year, you know, maybe winter 2021, I think would be lovely, you know, October maybe would be the right time to see this. And if that's going on, then we're all in a good place, right? I mean, it means that the vaccinations are happening and stuff. But that's, I suppose, talking to Pamela there, and you know, what we're seeing globally now, you know, not to end on a dark note, but you know, the different parity in terms of vaccination, and the, like, we're walking into as the World Health Organization said, we're walking into like a moral cataclysm, because, you know, we're vaccinating, rich are being vaccinated, rich countries are being vaccinated, and poor countries won't be. And it's both morally wrong and also scientifically absurd. It's absolutely absurd, because what you're going to do is vaccinate half the world, and then another variant will come along and we're back to square one, trying to scramble to revaccinate everybody. I mean, it's and I think, you know, if films like Arracht can teach us anything, it's you know, not to turn a blind eye, or not like with British foreign policy it did at the time, that, you know, I think we need to, you know, say something about these things in whichever way we can. Yeah, so that's the way I would like to end this, on a modern take. But yeah, it's been lovely talking to you guys. So thanks very much for inviting me along.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Tom, and thank you, Pamela, and thank you, Barry. And
tell all your friends about Arracht, everybody. Tell everybody about it. It'd be great if we could get people to, you know, my dream is the two 22-year-old couple on a Saturday night outside Liffey Valley Cinema in Dublin with their giant Cokes and their popcorn, and they've paid their 10 quid each to go in and see an Irish language feature film. Like, for me, that would be, that's, you know, that's something to be inspired by, you know.
And as it's Frederick Douglass week, Maureen, you might close us out with, I believe you've got something there. Maybe you'd read that.
I found an amazing quote from Douglass from 1865. And I was thinking about the British centuries-old attitude toward the Irish, about the Irish problem, the Irish question. What is to be done about the Irish? What is to be done about them? From, especially with, I mean, for centuries, but from Queen Victoria's time with the great hunger going on here. And then I found almost the exact same wording, the same wording. Frederick Douglass, 1865. Just quickly, I will read this tiny thing. What I ask for the Negro is not benevolence, not pity, not sympathy, just simply justice. The American people have always been anxious to know what to do with us, what to do with the Negro. I have had just one answer from the beginning: do nothing with us. All I ask is give him a chance to stand on his own legs, to let him alone. If you see him on his way, sorry, I'm trying to find this clue, the rest of it. To school, let him alone. Do not disturb him. If you see him going to dinner at a hotel, let him go. If you see him going to the ballot box, let him alone and do not disturb him. And I thought that was just so incredible, that Douglass, what to do with the Irish and what to do with the Black man. It's happening today with the very important Black Lives Matter movement still, with 70 million people don't understand what is going on in the nation. And to me, the Black experience, the Native American experience, the Irish experience, of course, Indian too, under British rule, it's so many parallels and so much pain. But the Irish, I have to say, like Tom said, I'm so proud of, well, you are born here. I, for some reason, was not born here. I was born in California, but I really feel that I was born here. But anyway, God's little joke. I was born in a place with no actual body of water, drinking water in a desert. But anyway, California is beautiful, but it's not Ireland. And I do think the Irish have, when people, especially my many years of students, say, what is it about the Irish when you're always talking about them? Not just the beauty of the land. And I love what you said about beauty versus pretty. It's the generative, creative spirit of the people that overcomes look at the booming film industry, the incredible poetry that comes out of this country, the literature that is just beyond, having taught Irish literature, beyond genius. Everything about it, I can't be objective. Kevin knows.
Thank you, Maureen, and we'll wrap it up there. Pamela.
Well, I hope to one day visit Ireland. I've never been to Ireland.
Pamela, you have to come. Well, why don't we all do the Lewis of the Dulac walk? We'll do it. It's the end of March, probably next year, not this year.
All right, I'll hold you to that.
It's incredible.
Pamela, thank you very much. Barry, Tom, of course, and
thanks, Kevin.
You've been wonderful panel and a wonderful subject matter. I'll hand you over to Caroline. Oh, and a special wee note for myself. Thank you very much again to Aidan Whelan for his terrific organising in Douglas Week and for getting us all together for this. Aidan has done a terrific job.
And thank you, Kevin.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Kevin.
Thanks, Kevin.
Good man.
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you, Sullivan, thank you, Tom, for a beautiful film.
Thank you, Pamela.
Masterpiece.
Thank you.
Caroline, would you like to wrap us up there, or?
Yes,
Yeah,
myself
I'll say
and
it.
my colleague Tim. I'll hand over to Tim, my colleague, to say the final words, but thank you everyone from me as well. Tim?
Yeah, everyone's been thanked, but I just want to say a final thank you to everyone for joining us today, and thank you so much to the panelists here for what I think was a really lovely, thoughtful and generous conversation. We really appreciate you sharing your personal experiences as well as your expertise with us. It was lovely to listen to. Thanks to Kevin for guiding this wonderful conversation, and thanks to Tom for sharing a scene from a film that I think everyone watching here is very much going to want to see and going to want to tell their friends about. Like all of you, I hope to be sitting in Liffey Valley or somewhere like it, enjoying Arracht on the big screen, and I really hope that is possible very soon. So thank you all for being with us today, and
Thanks, Tim.
yeah, thanks to you all. And I'll just finally say there's more Douglas Week events on, and go to douglasandcork.com if you want to see what else is happening tonight and tomorrow. Thanks from us, and good night.
Happy Douglas Week, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Slán, go to Margaret.